Have you ever wondered what actually happens when you take like the raw, unfiltered emotion of a major European sports final, completely strip all that away,
Yeah.
and just run the whole thing through a supercomputer 10,000 times?
It's a fun thought experiment, honestly.
Right. Because we always talk about the magic of the cup, the unpredictability of human adrenaline, the roaring crowds. But what happens when you just replace all that romanticism with cold, calculating algorithms?
You get a very different picture.
Exactly. So today, we're opening up a highly classified style tactical intelligence briefing for the UEFA Conference League final. This is taking place on May 27, 2026.
Yeah, and the matchup is just brilliant.
It really is. We've got an English Premier League transition heavyweight, Crystal Palace, colliding with a La Liga high-pressing disruptor, Rayo Vallecano.
And, this isn't just about football.
No, not at all. It's about the mathematical modeling of human fatigue. It's about the tactical paradoxes that emerge when two completely incompatible systems are, forced to share the same patch of grass.
Right. It's what happens when an unstoppable transition force meets an aggressively high-pressing object.
Yeah, perfectly said. It's basically the ultimate diagnostic look under the hood of reality.
Because, the narrative that the television broadcast will sell you, the passion, the grit, the history, that doesn't actually dictate where the ball goes.
No, it doesn't.
What dictates the outcome are the hidden mechanical gears turning behind every single pass. It's the geometric shapes the players form off the ball, and really the ruthlessly calculated risk management applied by both dugouts.
So it's math.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When we strip away the narrative and look purely at the mechanics of probability, we see a game that is far more chess than it is gladiatorial combat.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I want to dive straight into the environment, because before we even talk about the tactical formations or, what this supercomputer actually spat out, we have to talk about the physical space where this clash is happening.
The venue.
Right, the venue. The final is at the Red Bull Arena in Leipzig, Germany. And the source material we're looking at, it highlights a massive, glaring paradox right out of the gate regarding this location.
It's a huge factor.
Crystal Palace relies on their home form, on the energy of Selhurst Park in South London, for a staggering 80% of their overall success.
80% is wild.
It's a wildly disproportionate number. And now, for literally the biggest match of their modern history, they're playing on completely neutral soil.
Yeah, and the psychological and structural implications of that are profound.
Right.
When you look at a team that relies on their home venue for 80% of their points, you are usually looking at a squad that utilizes emotional momentum to artificially boost their physical output.
So they use the crowd as fuel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At Selhurst Park, the crowd's roar acts as a secondary engine. It fuels those exhausting transition sprints, it pressures referees into marginal calls, and it, genuinely intimidates opposing defensive lines.
But in Leipzig.
Right. In Leipzig, a neutral venue, that external engine is unplugged. They are suddenly forced to rely entirely on their internal tactical scaffolding.
I keep thinking about it like a band that relies heavily on the specific acoustics of their favorite dive bar.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, they know exactly how the bass bounces off the brick wall. They feed off the crowd being 2 feet away, and the sheer volume masks the fact that maybe their guitar is, slightly out of tune.
Right. They can hide their flaws.
Exactly. But you take that same band and put them on a massive open-air festival stage in a different country, all of those acoustic crutches just vanish.
Yeah, they do.
If they don't have absolute fundamental technical mastery of their instruments, their sound is just going to evaporate into the wind.
That's a brilliant way to frame it, because it perfectly contrasts with what the briefing tells us about Rayo Vallecano.
Right, they're the complete opposite.
They really are. Rayo exhibits the exact inverse profile. They're pulling in 1.49 points per game away from home in La Liga, which, that is a brutally difficult league to travel in.
It's a gauntlet.
It is. To take points on the road with that level of consistency proves that their system is structurally sound regardless of the environment.
So they don't care where they play.
Exactly. They do not need external validation to execute their game plan. Their high press, their defensive cohesion, it travels well.
Right. They aren't relying on the crowd to hype them up. Their system itself generates the intensity.
Yeah.
But let me push back a little here, because while Rayo might be the ultimate road warriors, we have to look at the guys steering the ship. The clash of pedigrees on the touchline is fascinating.
Oh, the managerial matchup is incredible.
Oliver Glasner at Crystal Palace versus Inigo Perez at Rayo.
Yeah.
The briefing notes that Glasner's domestic finish in the Premier League this season was just, well, mid. He finished 10th.
Right, middle of the pack.
But it assigns him a cup specialist rating of 90%.
Which is huge.
Right. How does a manager tread water for 38 league games but turn to a tactical genius in a knockout tournament?
What's fascinating here is that it comes down to the fundamental difference between macro management and micro targeting.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, in a 38-game league season, a manager needs a highly adaptable, generalized system. You're playing Manchester City one week and like a relegation battler the next. Your system has to survive both.
Right, you need a Swiss Army knife.
Exactly. Glasner historically struggles slightly with that week-to-week adaptability. However, in a one-off cup tie, you have weeks to dissect a single opponent.
Ah, so he can hyper-focus.
Yes. A 90% cup specialist rating indicates a manager who possesses an elite capacity for targeted exploitation. He can watch 50 hours of Rayo Vallecano footage, find the one structural crack in their pressing trigger, and design a bespoke 90-minute game plan designed explicitly to hammer a wedge into that specific crack.
Like what they did to Shakhtar.
Exactly. We saw it when they dismantled Shakhtar Donetsk 5-2 on aggregate. He doesn't need to be perfect all year. He just needs to be an elite problem solver for one night.
So he's a tactical assassin.
Basically, yeah.
But then you look at Inigo Perez, and he isn't built like that at all. The briefing describes Rayo as a peak momentum machine.
Yeah, they are rolling.
They really are. They're arriving in Leipzig riding an 87% form rating. They're unbeaten in 5 matches, stacking consecutive clean sheets, including that flawless 2-0 aggregate masterclass against Strasbourg.
Right.
They aren't designing bespoke game plans. They're just steamrolling people with their core identity.
Exactly. Perez has taken the high-pressing blueprint left by his predecessor, Andoni Iraola, and he's refined it into a rhythm engine.
A rhythm engine, I like that.
When a team is riding an 87% momentum wave, they aren't overthinking the opposition's tactics. They're operating on pure internalized muscle memory.
So it's just instinct at this point.
Completely. They know their pressing trigger so well they don't even have to look at each other. The danger of playing a momentum machine is that they impose their reality onto you. They force you to play their game at their speed.
Which sets up this incredible dynamic. Glasner has a scalpel perfectly sharpened for this one specific surgery, and Perez is just swinging a sledgehammer that he's been swinging successfully for a month straight.
That's a great contrast.
But let's look at how that actually translates into probability. I want to pull up the diagnostic matrix from the briefing, because the raw attacking metrics present a really strange contradiction.
Yeah, the underlying numbers here are essential to understanding why the supercomputer views this match the way it does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Crystal Palace has a staggering expected threat, or XT, of 5448.92 over the measured period, compared to Rayo's 4912.66.
Right.
Palace also dominates in expected goals, XG, sitting at 1.68 per 90 minutes versus Rayo's 1.21. So on raw output, Palace is clearly generating more dangerous actions and higher quality shooting opportunities.
Absolutely.
But, and this is where I get hung up on the data, Rayo's defensive numbers are absurd. Their expected goals allowed, XGA, is 0.98.
Under a goal a game.
Yeah. They are statistically expected to concede less than 1 goal a game. So Palace creates a ton, but Rayo gives up nothing. Are we looking at an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object?
It is the classic statistical paradox.
Yeah, explain that for us.
So expected threat, for those who might not dig into the granular analytics often, it maps the progression of the ball into valuable areas. It rewards teams that consistently move the ball into the final third, even if a shot isn't actually taken.
Got it.
Palace's high XT combined with their high XG tells us that when they get into those areas, they are incredibly lethal. However, Rayo's sub 1.000 XGA in a league like La Liga implies a defensive structure that actively suppresses the quality of chances.
So they don't just block shots.
Right. They don't just stop shots. They force you to take bad shots from bad angles under heavy pressure.
So we're looking at an incredibly efficient attacking machine slamming into a defensive structure designed specifically to degrade efficiency.
Exactly.
But what really caught my eye in the data is what the analysts labeled the build-up anomaly. This is where the stats completely defy what you expect from a modern European final.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Both of these teams are demonstrably terrible at traditional build-up play.
It is arguably the most revealing metric in the entire dossier. Out of all the teams analyzed, Palace ranks 14th in build-up effectiveness, and Rayo ranks 13th.
Which means neither of them wants to do the whole, sterile domination thing.
Right.
Neither team wants to have their center backs slowly passing the ball back and forth, probing for an opening like Manchester City or Arsenal. They both actively avoid methodical possession in their own third.
Yeah, they hate it.
But why? If you're a top-tier team, why are you allergic to holding onto the ball?
Well, because in modern football, the defensive third has become a death trap.
A death trap.
Literally. Both of these managers recognize that the most mathematically dangerous place to lose the ball is 25 yards from your own goal against a set defense.
Patch.
Adam Wharton. He is the central nervous system of Crystal Palace's transition game, and Rayo Vallecano knows it.
The scene this briefing sets is incredible. It outlines Rayo's hunting strategy, and it reads like a thriller movie. Like a targeted assassination.
It really is.
Rayo's central midfielder, Unai Lopez, has been given a singular destructive mission by Inigo Perez, relentlessly shadow, harass, and hunt Adam Wharton in the Palace third. The entire goal is to force Wharton into a critical ball loss right in front of his own penalty area.
Because Rayo knows that if they can sever the brain from the body, Palace cannot function. Wharton is the pivot.
He's the guy.
He is the player who receives the ball deep, turns, and fires the passes that start the counterattacks. If Unai Lopez can panic Wharton, if he can force a heavy touch or a blind pass, Rayo gets exactly what they want, a high-quality turnover in a most dangerous zone on the pitch.
It's basically putting Wharton inside a pressure cooker. It's like playing a game of tag in a minefield.
Yes.
He's got his back to goal, he's receiving the ball 25 yards from his own net, and Unai Lopez is sprinting at him like a heat-seeking missile. One wrong step by Wharton, and Rayo detonates right in front of the goal. It feels incredibly risky for Palace to rely on one guy not making a mistake under that kind of targeted physical assault.
It is an immense burden, but the briefing details exactly why Glasner trusts him. It highlights Wharton's elite press resistance.
Press resistance, okay.
And press resistance isn't just about dribbling, it's about spatial awareness, body shape, and scanning. Before the ball even reaches his feet, Wharton has scanned his shoulders 3 times. He knows exactly the angle Lopez is approaching from, and he knows exactly where his passing lanes are.
So he uses his body shape to shield the ball, absorbing the impact of Lopez. And because he already scanned the field, he can execute a pass on the half-turn before the rest of the Rayo press can swarm him.
Exactly. He is the tactical glue. And the briefing outlines the devastating counter effect for Rayo if Wharton succeeds.
What happens?
Well, Rayo has committed Lopez and their aggressively high defensive line to this trap. If Wharton hits just one successful line-breaking pass to the half spaces, the entire Rayo trap collapses on itself.
They're totally exposed.
Completely exposed. They pushed all their chips to the center of the table, and Wharton just walked away with the pot.
Because if he breaks that first line of pressure, there is literally no one left in the midfield. And the intelligence report notes exactly who is waiting for that pass, Daichi Kamada and Ismail Assar.
The report specifically places Kamada and Sarr in the standard aerial channels. They are hovering right on the shoulder of Rayo's high defensive line.
Ready to run.
They know Wharton is going to be under immense pressure, but they trust his delivery. The moment Wharton shapes to play that vertical pass, Sarr and Kamada are launching into a dead sprint.
Which means this entire European final, with all its complex tactical structures, might genuinely be decided by a brutal 90-minute one-on-one duel in the center circle.
It really might.
How many times can Unai Lopez cleanly tackle Adam Wharton versus how many times Wharton can spin him and launch a 40-yard missile? That is unbelievable tension.
It perfectly distills the chaos of the sport. You can have the most advanced double Poisson math engines in the world, but it ultimately hinges on the biomechanics and the split-second decision-making of 2 men colliding in the midfield.
Yeah, that human element. But Wharton's battle is central, and there are other individual duels out on the edges that will ultimately decide the match. The supercomputer highlights several pitch geography hotspots. Let's look at the key battlegrounds.
Okay, let's do it.
The first one is a direct clash on the flank Palace's Maxence Lacroix against Rayo's Jorge de Frutos.
This is a textbook example of a modern defensive assignment countering a modern attacking profile. Jorge de Frutos is Rayo's primary transition spearhead.
He's dangerous.
Very. The brief notes his 12 goals and 4 assists, making him arguably their most potent individual threat.
And as we discussed with the inverted wingers, De Frutos isn't a guy who wants to hug the touchline, run to the corner flag, and whip it across. He wants to take the ball, aggressively cut inside on a diagonal run, and shoot from the edge of the box.
Right.
So how does Lacroix, a center back, deal with a winger with that kind of agility and goal-scoring pedigree?
By utilizing the structural advantage of the back five we talked about, but pairing it with Lacroix's specific athletic profile.
Okay, how so?
The briefing explicitly names Lacroix's sweeping speed and localized cover. Most center backs lack the lateral quickness to step out of the defensive line and track a fast winger cutting inside. They get their ankles broken or they commit a foul.
Right, they're usually too slow for that.
But Lacroix is different. He has the elite acceleration required to step up and aggressively shadow DeFrutos the moment he cuts inside.
So because Lacroix has the pace to match DeFrutos, and because he knows he has two other center backs covering the space he just vacated within that back five, he can afford to be highly aggressive.
Exactly.
He can step into the midfield and stamp out the spark before DeFrutos even gets near the penalty box. It's a complete structural negation of Rayo's best weapon.
It forces DeFrutos to either stay wide, where he is less effective, or try to cut inside and run directly into a brick wall named Maxence Lacroix. It's a brilliant tactical alignment by Glasner.
Okay, that covers Palace neutralizing Rayo. But the supercomputer also points out a massive vulnerability on the other end of the pitch. The second key battleground is Palace striker Jean-Philippe Mateta versus the Rayo high defensive line.
This is a huge mismatch.
It seems like it. The briefing gives Mateta a massive 29.8% anytime goal probability.
Wow.
I know. It is predicting a near 1 in 3 chance that he finds the back of the net. Why is the algorithm so incredibly confident in him?
Because the algorithm looks at Rayo's defensive heat map and sees a terrifying vulnerability. We know Rayo plays a high press, and to keep their team compact, their defensive line has to push incredibly high up the pitch, often near the halfway line.
Right, to squeeze the space.
But this leaves 30 to 40 yards of completely empty grass between the Rayo center backs and their own goalkeeper.
And the briefing drops a statistic here that is honestly mind-blowing. It notes that Rayo concedes an extreme 26 last-man challenges per season.
Yeah, that number is borderline structural negligence.
Wait, 26? That is just absurd.
It really is. For the listeners, a last-man challenge is exactly what it sounds like. It's a situation where an attacker has completely bypassed the entire defensive structure, and a defender is forced into a desperate sprinting tackle as the absolute final obstacle before the goalkeeper.
So it's a panic move.
Completely. Conceding 26 of those in a single season means that Rayo's offside trap is consistently failing, their high line is constantly being broken, and their center backs are continually forced into nightmare foot races toward their own goal.
And now those center backs have to get into a foot race with Jean-Philippe Mateta.
Exactly. The intelligence briefing outlines the stark physical mismatch. Mateta isn't a complex false nine playmaker. He is a physical powerhouse with immense straight-line speed.
He's a tank.
Yeah, he doesn't need to dribble through 3 players. He just needs to wait for Adam Wharton to beat the press, watch for the ball to be launched into those aerial channels over the top of the Rayo defense, and then out-sprint Rayo's slower center backs.
It's going to force those Rayo defenders into horrific decisions. When Mateta gets past them, they're going to have to decide in a split second whether to let him go one-on-one with the keeper or pull him down and take a highly penalizing foul.
A guaranteed red card or a penalty, yeah.
These individual matchups are perfect on paper. They heavily favor Crystal Palace. Now, we finally feed the data into the machine. We're entering the lab, the Monte Carlo simulation.
This is where we move past theory, past human bias, and into rigorous, simulated probability.
The briefing states that this entire tactical intelligence package was run through a math engine. Now, I'll be honest, I am not a statistician, and I'm guessing most people listening aren't either. Can you actually explain how this double Poisson math engine works without making it sound like a college math lecture?
I can try.
How does a computer digest all these variables?
Let's keep it accessible but smart. A standard Poisson distribution is a mathematical concept used to predict the probability of a specific number of events occurring within a fixed interval of time.
Okay, simple enough.
In our context, the event is a goal, and the time is 90 minutes. It takes a team's historical scoring rate and predicts how likely they are to score 0, 1, 2, or 3 goals in a match.
Okay, so that's a single Poisson. What makes it a double Poisson?
A double Poisson model runs 2 of these calculations simultaneously, but crucially, it allows them to interact. It doesn't just look at Palace's attack in a vacuum.
Right.
It takes Palace's attacking strength, their XG, their transition speed, Mateta's conversion rate, and mathematically rubs it against Rayo's defensive strength, their low XGA, their PPDA, their high-line vulnerability. It calculates the friction between the two
It
systems.
mashes them together.
Exactly, and it does the exact same thing for Rayo's attack against Palace's defense.
And the briefing states that the engine didn't just run this once. It ran 10,000 cycles.
10,000.
It inputted the XG of 1.68. It applied the Rayo defensive modifier of 0.90. It actually scaled and adjusted the probabilities dynamically based on all the injury absences we talked about to find what the analysts call the true center of gravity for the match.
It is the ultimate elimination of variance. Over a small sample size, like one game, anything can happen. A referee makes a bad call, a player slips on wet grass.
Right, the human element.
Yeah, but over 10,000 simulations, those anomalies are smoothed out, revealing the absolute baseline truth of how these two systems interact.
So out of those 10,000 universes, what actually happened? Let's reveal the 90-minute clusters. What are the most probable outcomes the computer spit out?
The first major takeaway challenges the idea that this will be a scoreless, cagey final. Despite Rayo's elite defensive numbers, the simulation shows that the over 2.5 goals market has a 51.1% probability.
More than half the time, the machine predicts 3 or more goals.
Yes, and the both teams to score, or BTTS market, is hitting at 52.6%.
Oh, wow.
The model strongly believes that the structural flaws in both systems, Palace missing Richards, Rayo's exposed highline guarantee that neither team is keeping a clean sheet.
The model also identifies a top threat assessment, and it isn't Mateta. It flags Ismaila Sarr with a 36.4% anytime goal probability. The computer thinks Sarr is the ultimate danger man. Why him?
Because the algorithm recognizes the tactical chain reaction we discussed earlier, Sarr is the primary beneficiary of the Adam Wharton escape hatch.
The guy waiting for the pass.
Exactly. The computer calculates that Wharton will break the press, and when he does, Sarr's sheer pace against Rayo's retreating, disorganized defense yields the highest probability scoring scenarios in the entire simulation.
But the most fascinating part of the data is when you look at the exact scoreline probabilities, the peak of the bell curve. The single most likely score at the exact end of 90 minutes is a 1-1 draw. It happens in 12.4% of the simulations.
It is closely followed by a 1-0 Palace win at 11.1% and a 2-1 Palace win at 9.8%.
So the single most frequent result, the center of gravity in the supercomputer, is a grueling 1-1 draw in regulation time.
Which perfectly aligns with the tactical friction we've analyzed for the past hour. Rayo's press is simply too relentless, and their volume of dangerous attacks is too high for Palace to entirely avoid conceding at least one mistake without Chris Richards anchoring the defense.
They'll crack eventually.
Right. But simultaneously, Palace's deep block and their lethal vertical transitions guarantee they will punish Rayo's exposed highline at least once. It is the mathematical formula for a bruising, exhausting stalemate.
The simulation heavily points to a draw in regulation. So what is the ultimate conclusion of this intelligence briefing? Let's look at the analytical conclusions and the final verdict.
This is the moment we translate abstract probability into actionable, real-world strategy.
Let's start with who the computer thinks actually lifts the trophy at the end of the night. The overarching odds, the final distillation of all 10,000 cycles, give Crystal Palace a 57.8% chance to win the UEFA Conference League, compared to 42.2% for Rayo Vallecano.
Palace is the clear mathematically sound favorite. However, the briefing delivers a critical piece of actionable insight regarding market inefficiencies.
Oh, this is good.
It states that the prediction and betting markets are currently significantly overvaluing a routine 90-minute Crystal Palace victory.
Because the public sees a Premier League team, they see Glasner's European pedigree, they see the 5-2 win over Shakhtar, and they assume Palace is just going to steamroll Rayo in normal time.
Exactly. Public perception is heavily weighted by league reputation and recent blowout wins. But the simulation, looking purely at the tactical mechanics, heavily points to a tight, low-scoring regulation period.
So what's the play?
Therefore, the intelligence briefing identifies the true value market target as betting on under 2.5 goals strictly within the initial 90 minutes.
Interesting.
The computer gives that a 48.9% probability. The odds offered by bookmakers are heavily skewed by public bias, meaning there is significant mathematical value in betting on the 90-minute tactical grind.
So the smart money, the algorithmic certainty, is that the first 90 minutes are going to be incredibly tight. Rayo will press, Palace will absorb, Wharton will try to escape, and it will likely end 1-1.
That's the baseline truth.
But it's a European final. We need a winner. The match cannot end in a draw.
Mm.
So what is the definitive edge? Ask for the final simulated prediction. What did the machine say?
The final score prediction, generated after 10,000 cycles, is printed right at the bottom of the briefing. Crystal Palace 2, Rayo Vallecano 1, after extra time.
Wow. After extra time.
Yeah. The briefing explains that over a grueling 120 minutes, the physiological and tactical variables shift permanently and irreversibly in Crystal Palace's favor.
Because of the 76-minute monster we talked about.
Exactly. We talked extensively about Palace scoring 31% of their goals late. Over 120 minutes, Palace's superior physical conditioning and their deeper bench become insurmountable advantages.
The fresh legs take over.
Adam Wharton's press resistance continues to function, while Unai Lopez and the Rayo midfield simply run out of oxygen. And crucially, Oliver Glasner's elite tournament pedigree, his ability to read the degradation of the opponent's structure and make the perfect, targeted substitution, ultimately shatters Rayo's mathematical resistance.
It becomes a pure war of attrition. And the computer mathematically proves that Palace has deeper physical and tactical reserves. We've taken an incredible journey today unpacking this document.
It's been wild.
We started by examining the neutral soil of Leipzig and how taking Palace out of South London fundamentally alters their psychological profile.
We dissected the intense tactical friction of Glasner's localized overloads, intentionally inviting the chaotic aggression of Perez's high press.
We analyzed the critical micro-battles, Adam Wharton utilizing his scanning and body shape to escape Unai Lopez in a phone booth, Maxence Lacroix using his sweeping speed to shut down DeFruto's diagonal runs, and the sheer physical mismatch of Mateta, terrifying a Rayo defense that recklessly concedes 26 last-man challenges a year.
We weighed the cascading tactical failures caused by losing Chris Richards against the operational asymmetric width provided by Borna Sosa.
And finally, we fed every single one of those variables into the double Poisson math engine, which simulated 10,000 realities and concluded that Palace will endure the initial grind, break Rayo's spirit in extra time, and lift the trophy.
It is a stunning, comprehensive breakdown of modern football analytics.
It's the absolute pinnacle of tactical intelligence, showcasing how every movement on the pitch is part of a larger calculable equation.
It really is.
But I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over. We have spent this entire deep dive looking at flawlessly executed mathematical simulations. We've examined XG models, transition speed metrics, and double Poisson distributions. We've treated the players like data points.
Which they are, in the model.
Right. But human beings are not algorithms. When you are in the 115th minute of a European final, your legs are literally made of lead. Your lungs are burning so intensely you can barely breathe. The crowd in Leipzig is roaring so loud that you cannot hear your captain shouting tactical adjustments from 5 feet away.
The human element.
Exactly. In that exact moment of absolute blinding physical and mental exhaustion, does a double Poisson math engine still matter? Do expected threat metrics hold any weight when a player's running on pure primal adrenaline? Or does it all just come down to who wants it more, who is willing to suffer more in that exact fraction of a second?